The telegram arrived in Berlin at 3 a.m. on June 17, 1940. It was not the armistice Hitler expected. It declared that Britain and France had merged into one state and would fight to the death. The Franco-British Union was not a treaty. It was a dissolution. Churchill and de Gaulle, in a smoke-filled London room, signed away the sovereignty of both nations. Joint citizenship, a single war cabinet, merged armies, navies, and empires. Two ancient enemies became one country in a single afternoon. The French cabinet had been hours from surrender. Pétain was drafting armistice terms, but a handful of votes shifted, and instead of capitulation, there was fusion. The French fleet, fourth largest in the world, received one order: make for British ports. Every ship turned north. Lieutenant Armand Dubois stood on the bridge of the Richelieu as Brittany dissolved into haze. He had expected to scuttle his vessel. Instead, he steamed for Plymouth, where a new flag was already being designed, the Union Jack crossed with the tricolor. He would never see France again as a separate country. There was no Vichy regime, no French collaboration. The entire apparatus of the French Republic relocated to London and Algiers. French North Africa became an Anglo-French stronghold overnight. The Mediterranean, which should have been an Axis lake, became an Allied highway. Rommel never got his supply lines through Tunisia. The Afrika Korps starved 50 miles from the Nile. The war in North Africa ended by late 1941. By 1943, the combined Anglo-French army was the most experienced fighting force on the planet. Instead of D-Day in Normandy, the Union launched Operation Deluge, an invasion of southern France from North Africa and Corsica. The landing was swift and decisive. The Germans had stripped the Riviera of defenses. Paris was liberated in spring 1944. Berlin fell in autumn, but the city was not divided among four powers. It was divided among three: the Anglo-French Union, the Soviet Union, and the United States. The Cold War began with a third player on the board. The Union controlled a global empire from the Mekong to the Caribbean. It possessed a nuclear arsenal, developed jointly at Cambridge and the Sorbonne, tested in the Sahara under a flag that had never existed before 1940. It held a permanent UN Security Council seat, wielding veto power as a single bloc. The Soviet Union faced one unified imperial power speaking with a single voice. Decolonization became a war of attrition. The Union fought to keep its empire together. In Indochina, Algeria, West Africa, nationalist movements faced a combined military drawing on two continents. The Union was more efficient than either Britain or France alone. It was also more ruthless. The Suez Crisis never happened. The Union owned the canal outright. By the 1960s, the world was a three-way standoff: Union, USSR, USA, each with nuclear weapons, each with a sphere of influence. The space race became a three-way sprint. The Olympics, a three-way propaganda war. Global power was a triangle. And somewhere in this world, a child born in 1940 grew up never knowing a time when Britain and France were separate. To them, the English Channel was a river crossed by bridges and tunnels built in the 1950s. The flags were one, woven together, as inseparable as the two peoples who had finally decided to become one. That child was Jeanette Mercier, in a small Normandy village. She never understood why her grandmother called the English les rosebifs with a sharp edge. To Jeanette, the people across the channel were simply countrymen. She learned in school that the flag was called the Union Tricolor, born in a single desperate night. She memorized June 17, 1940, as solemnly as other children memorized the fall of the Bastille. She grew up in a world where the Channel Tunnel opened in 1955, its first train carrying schoolchildren from Dover to Calais, under a banner reading Unis pour toujours. Jeanette pressed her face to the window as white cliffs dissolved into gray shoreline that looked exactly the same. She did not understand why her grandmother wept when they emerged into French sunlight. By 20, Jeanette worked in a joint administrative office in London, processing colonial paperwork for West Africa. The office had portraits of Churchill and de Gaulle side by side. She stamped forms requiring signatures from both ministers, but the signatures often looked alike, scrawled by officials born into the same world she had. She took the ferry home for Christmas. The old vessel still flew pre-Union flags in a glass case near the captain's quarters. Jeanette stood on deck as the ship crossed the gray water, thinking of her grandmother's stories, watching the Richelieu steam past, the fleet disappear into mist, never believing they would return. They had come back to liberate, occupy, stay. Her grandmother died the year the Union celebrated its 20th anniversary. Jeanette wore a white dress to the bonfire on the beach, not understanding why the old woman refused to attend. The wind caught her hair as the lights of Calais appeared. She thought of the telegram, yellow paper, black type, a date stamp. She imagined the hand that opened it, the eyes that read it. She wondered if that hand trembled. The ferry horn echoed. Jeanette watched the shore grow closer. A pier where a boarder once stood, now only a sign reading Bienvenue, welcome in identical letters. She did not know that in a few years she would become a translator in the Union's diplomatic corps, that her accent, a blend of Norman French and London English, would become the standard for a generation. She only knew that the ferry was moving, that the sky was vast, and that somewhere in Berlin a monument to the moment of union was being planned, a single spire for a single people.